Colonel James Bo Gritz was running for president in 1992. At the same time, he was the most decorated military officer ever. His great idea? Roll a big pot metal coin into the Fed for the amount of the national debt and say, good luck cashing this. It's worth about what you've been giving us. Whose faces do you suggest we put on that big coin? In God We Trust, with George Washington, Andrew Jackson, John F. Kennedy, James Bo Gritz, and hey, James wasn't president. Bill Clinton stole that election. But any others? And what do you suggest for the tail side of this big coin? A symbol of our life force energy? Some sacred geometry? How simple and easy is that? That process could be completed in one day. As mentioned, the purpose of this program is to help us solve our problems as fast and as easy as possible. All we have to have is balance. If there's too much money in circulation, then it turns into continental money or Confederate money. Where there's not enough in circulation, it's recession. In between is a balance, which maintains value and prevents the manipulation and repression of the people. The same principles out of balance is how parasitic elites have manipulated economies throughout history. Remember the Bauer Rothschild quote. He doesn't care who controls a company or nation, as long as they control the purse strings, the money, as long as they get paid, they're just fine. John D. Rockefeller was born in 1839 in Richmond, New York. He formed alliance as an agent of Rothschild's and established Standard Oil Trust by 1870. Standard Oil Trust was the first trust in the United States and was set up to create a monopoly that would otherwise be illegal. To create a monopoly, it broke our rules of peace. It devastated and repressed the citizens of the United States to the point the first antitrust laws were passed in 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act. It took several presidents to enforce the Sherman Antitrust Act because of the absolute power of wealth, political power, and legal power they influenced. And by 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled it was a monopoly, and Rockefeller took his investment to set up Rockefeller Foundation as both a tax haven and to strategically take over the petropharmaceutical drug industry and the United States, as well as global healthcare and the health insurance industry. And it's been doctors, lawyers, drug companies, and insurance companies working together ever since, around the globe, fleecing their poor clients. The Supreme Court decision of 1911 didn't seem to slow Rockefeller's plans at all. They simply divided up into a whole bunch of different companies, some of which are now called the Seven Sisters. So now we have a bunch of monsters to deal with instead of just one. It's like it was just a gang, and it's divided into many cells, which appear to be capable of operating independently on paper, but are still under the control of Rockefeller. In fact, the main ways our gangs operate today are basically how the parasitic elite have operated over the course of history, just much more secretly, with a much greater level of legal, political, and financial brainpower. The parasitic elites, mostly unnamed here, are the most experienced criminals in history. The mobs around the world and the street gangs like the Bloods and Crips are like cheap labor trained by the parasitic elites to do their dirty work. How could that be? These gangs were rivals because the parasitic elites have always used the divide and conquer tactics anyway. It was the Bloods and Crips that first made their secret oaths very public, how they had to kill someone to get in and get killed to get out of the gang. What's much worse is the absolute mob-like terror of Standard Oil Trust on the U.S. economy, combined with Rothschild's actions during this time, caused the banking system to be reformed around 1910 to 1913 into the Fed, or the Federal Reserve, the Rothschild's third and current central bank in the U.S. Congressman Charles Lindbergh said, "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this bill, the invisible government of the monetary power will be legalized. The greatest crime of the ages is perpetuated by this banking and currency bill." A few years after signing the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, Woodrow Wilson wrote, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world, no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Woodrow Wilson. The Fed is no more federal than Federal Express. We produce the bond, allowing them to print money. They print the money and charge us interest. What kind of printing company does that? Who allows their printing company to do that? Well, we do. If you'll remember, Rothschilds teamed up with John D. Rockefeller and Joe Kennedy, JFK's father, to set up the First and Second Baptist churches of metropolitan New York, just before the Fed was put into play. And they set up the IRS as their collection agency. But they're no more federal than Federal Reserve either. They're private. In fact, the IRS is set up in Puerto Rico, which is only a territory. It's not actually a state. So they can operate on the United States with diplomatic immunity. They've been offered several times to secede as a state, and they've always refused. I wonder why. IRS agents are secret agents who get paid on commission and operate under a secret agent alias and have a secret agent handbook. They essentially have a title of nobility which gives them special privileges. Every dime that goes into the IRS after their agents get paid on commission goes into the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, into the hands of the international bankers. Not one dime goes to pay for roads, schools, or anything most people think that it goes for. When you think of IMF, think international monetary fraud. They've infected the whole world. The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson. Franklin D. Roosevelt, in a letter to Colonel House dated November 21st, 1933. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford. I'm sure they don't mind U.S. citizens thinking they've actually won the war, like of 1812, as long as they, the parasitic elite, keep getting their cut. The Fed is conservatively estimated to generate over $150 billion in profits every year and has never in history shown its books. In 1913, the Rothschilds also established the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, in the United States to label anyone who challenged the global elites as anti-Semitic. And they're the ones that funded Hitler. The Rothschilds began to purchase and control many main news media firms like Reuters in London, Havas in France, and Wolf in Germany, as well as news media in the United States. Check out www.luckinlove.com/rothmedia.htm for more details. Los Angeles writer Anita Sanz Hernandez echoes the same information available in many areas online. She says, there were 88 media companies. Now there are 6, all owned and controlled by us, the Rothschilds. These 6 get their news from Reuters and the Associated Press. Reuters owns the AP, and Rothschilds own Reuters. That means a gazillionaire controls everything that you will read or see on TV. If we don't fix things from their root, from where they start, we're just trimming the weeds, and we can be doing that, chasing our tail from now till doomsday. With some things, we have to stand up and solve the big problem first. We still haven't solved this, and we can do it together. We have to educate people. You can YouTube Rockefeller Men and find some great material there. There's also a book called Rockefeller Medicine Men, Medicine and Capitalism in America by E. Richard Brown, University of California Press, 1979.